Good afternoon. My name is Emerald Saunders Davis, many of you know, Interim Senior Advisor Equity and Diversity here at UTSC. There is a saying commonly used in the land of my birth, Jamaica. The saying goes like this: "She little, but she tall." Translated, this means that she is small, but mighty or powerful. When I think of Professor Wane, I think of this saying. She is mighty, she is powerful, but there is nothing small about her. I first met the award-winning professor and Boise's Associate Chair of Social Justice Education early in 2012. At that time, she was serving in the role of Special Advisor on Status of Women issues. She had been appointed to that role the previous June. She immediately set out to put her extensive expertise and experience to work. She undertook a research project that culminated in the report, a critical analysis of the perception of the quality of representation of women at U of T. It should come as no surprise that her report was, and remains, visionary. The top 6 recommendations from study participants remain germane in 2017. An outstanding teacher, scholar, researcher, and mentor, the university has benefited from Professor Wane's pedagogical brilliance for 20 years. She has actively contributed to research and policy development on a wide range of issues, including gender, sexual orientation, indigenous knowledge practices, colonialism and development, and anti-racism education. She's also served in several leadership roles at Boise and has been widely published, appearing prominently in books, book chapters, and journals. And dozens of graduate students have benefited from Dr. Wane's supervision. So we're honored to have Professor Wane with us this afternoon, and it is my privilege to introduce her and to welcome her to the podium.
Thank you. Introduction. Sometimes what I usually do is just do what I'm comfortable doing, and in the process I meet people. In the process I meet doers. In the process I meet visionaries, and in the process I meet implementers. And out of that, most of the time I get the credit for what others have done. And being a recipient of the President Teaching Award is actually a community award. Because without my students, without the support I've gotten from you, people with the research, I don't think I would have done it. So thank you. So this afternoon, what we're going to do is a conversation. It's a conversation where I will just ask a lot of questions, and then out of those questions we can, we can have a conversation. Because I always believe that there is a spelling mistake on the answer. How do I do it? How you're not recording?
I saw the eye.
How do I go back to the...
Anne's experienced racism too.
I know the answer to this. Wow, you need to see it on the screen. And excellent. Wow. Now we are ready to go. Excellent. So I start with the quote. We live in a diverse, ever-evolving society. As always, race and social class and all the other aspects of sexual orientation, ability, language, religion are all together, intricably linked together. We can't separate them and put them in different different places, and then we take one by one and start analyzing them. They are all together. So the public education system has to be a major player in the transformation of Canada into a much more inclusive and positive society for all people. And what I would like to say is that at least this campus, when you walk through it, you don't feel alone. There are so many racialized students. There are so many racialized people within this campus that it's comforting. It's comforting to be in this campus. So the question is, are we doing what is supposed to be done to ensure that our racialized students are comfortable and are achieving what they came out to achieve? Some of the guiding questions that I have for this afternoon's presentation is, how do we take up diversity and difference in our teaching, or even in our administrative roles? So you can actually move teaching to whatever role you're playing. How do we identify the invisible and hidden biases that might hinder students learning or whatever role we are making? Because many times when we meet people, what happens is that there is that notion, oh my God, who is she? Without us, so you have to constantly pinch yourself and say, no, that thought did not go through my mind. So we have to constantly watch the biases that we have, the biases that we are trying to eliminate. Could the anti-racist education be a first step in the transformation process? I do not know. You have to decide. It has worked for me, it has helped me, it has provided conversations for me in class, and have made sure that the students are very comfortable in providing. By employing critical education pedagogies and social theories, is it possible to articulate a pedagogical discourse, to understand the political organization and issues of equity or inequity in our universities? What is it that we need to start thinking about? How politically we need to be organized? What conversations we need to have, not only with the students, not only with faculty, not only with the staff, but also when you go to senior administrative offices. What are some of the conversations? What are some of the entry points we need to have so that people are comfortable? Because what I always say is that in order to have a conversation, a meaningful conversation, it's important that you don't come out as a confrontational kind of thing, oh, you haven't done this or you haven't done that. Ask in form of questions and have a conversation. Maybe many times people have not even thought about what you're talking about, or they have thought about it, but they don't want to touch that subject. But if you create an environment that is conducive for a conversation, where people don't feel threatened, then you find that a conversation can be held that is meaningful. Because I always say that when we're talking about issues of diversity, we are all implicated. It's not a one person's or one group's job to do. We are all implicated. And on that note, I'll stop there and say, I want to acknowledge this land. I want to acknowledge the indigenous people whose land we have come to settle. Some of us did not come here willingly, came in enslaved as enslaved people. Some of us came as settlers and colonizers. And I want to ask for their forgiveness and their acceptance to share the land with us. So I argue that the task of genuine educational transformation is not simply to reform existing teaching pedagogy practices, but to begin by addressing the pointed problems of social difference and knowledge production in our teaching, as well as emphasizing social and cultural values that promote alternative readings on the wall. I want to pause a little bit and ask ourselves, when we talk about social difference, what do we mean by social difference? What exactly do we mean by social difference? Because sometimes when we are talking about social difference, it might not be obvious. Especially when it comes to class, it might not be obvious. Because I always say that I can go to a place where I can get cheap clothes and dress really nice. I can hide my social class. But many times I cannot hide my race. As soon as I enter here, people don't need to be told that I'm a black woman. as soon as I open my mouth, people are being to be told that I'm from the continent because of my accent. So there are certain social differences that you cannot hide. If I'm wearing a hijab, you don't need to be told that I'm a Muslim woman. So they are particular. So we need to put those things on the table as we start a class, as we start a meeting, as we are in administrative roles, so that we can start, even not even negotiating, we can start looking for ways to ensure that all the social differences that are on the table, visible or invisible, are actually on the table, and they are being addressed by whoever is in a responsible position. And it also becomes our social responsibility to do that. There are challenges. It's not easy. When I talk, it's easy to talk. But I'm telling you, sometimes to disrupt the normative, it's very hard. To disrupt what has been normalized for 500 years, it becomes very, very difficult. To disrupt the different ways that valid knowledge is taken into consideration, the Eurocentric ways of knowing is extremely difficult. To disrupt and to bring different discourses, there is always a question mark. If you are coming to talk about African ways of knowing, do Africa have anything to offer? That's always a question I always get. So how do we ensure that we disrupt the normative? How do we ensure that there are different ways of knowledge production? How do we ensure that there are multiple ways, of knowing, there are multiple ways of teaching, there are multiple ways of interacting, and there are different alternative ways of the way knowledge is shared? How do we ensure? There are challenges, and that's why these conversations are so important, so that we can start addressing them, so that we can start asking ourselves as we are preparing for our courses, as we are preparing to go for meetings, how do we ensure that my way of presenting takes care of all the people represented all around the table? So I'm proposing to begin to get beyond the initial impulse to talk about conflict and resistance. And I'll stop there. Conflict and resistance. I'll tell you, when the entry point is conflict, it drains all the energy. It becomes, it creates bad blood. It creates bad attitude, And also when you talk to me and I say, listen, let me tell you, I'm sick and tired of this. It starts from that notion of resistance. So that's the way it's taken. It's taken as that angry black woman. And I'm not angry. I'm not angry. Maybe I may be carrying the weight of my ancestors on my shoulders, and the weight of the community, and the responsibility when I go out of the campus map or the campus space. They ask me, Joki, what is happening out there? Those questions. So it's always good to start from the standpoint where we are putting our energy, we are directing our energy to positive ways of starting our conversations, to positive ways of seeing what is it that we can do together to change the status quo, and to become aware of the historical context of contemporary social relations globally. What is the history that has not been taught? What is the history that is not in our books? When, for instance, of course now when we start our conversations, when we go to conferences here in Canada, even in the US now, people start by acknowledging the land. That's a good step. That's the right way to start these conversations. Could you have done it if it hadn't been because of the Truth and Reconciliation report? Could we have done it? How much of the history has been covered up? What are we doing to uncover that, to unmask that? What are we doing to ensure that even when we do not have to uncover that in our private life, we take private classes outside the university to educate ourselves? How do we ensure that when it comes to the people, like in this room, you get to understand their history, what they have been put through. And not necessarily because you have to do it, but because you're genuinely interested in their welfare. And then, what are the connectivities? What is the connecting tissue that puts us together as children from a global village, so that we can work together? Not to make others comfortable at the moment, not to use Anne Lopez terminology, laminated equity, where we talk nice, everything is cool, but where it's genuine equity that we're talking about. So overview. So in the last decade, we can say 2, 3, 4 decades, the faces of the children in our schools, in some campuses of U of T have changed. We have all kinds of people, and you can actually see it. You can see the faces that are holding the map, the Canadian map, our map. Interestingly, the young boy on the left-hand side, the black boy on the left-hand side who is seated is my son. I didn't know when he got to do this. So when I was looking for something to post, I said, when did you have this done? Again, translation. If, for instance, we have to go around our campus and see the many languages of saying hello, it's amazing. So you can actually see this is a true multicultural society. I'll problematize that later. It's a true multicultural society, the way we say hello in Jambo. Bonjour, ni hao, and so on and so forth. I know a few, and so on and so forth. So changes for our schools, because you see, the reason why we have the children or the students that I indicated in the first slide is because the schools are changing. It's no longer a monolithic kind of students that schools are changing. So we here at the university have to start changing, have to start thinking differently, and challenging, like having to think of the challenges for teachers, and it's specifically for educational programs, because they prepare our schools. And this is why I'm really grateful for the academy, the teaching academy, because then we'll get a chance to go around and have conversations on how changes can be done. This is also good because with the Center for Innovative, the one that has invited me here, it's important because then we can have places where we can start going and sitting down and coming up with different pedagogical ways of teaching. I'm telling you, if today I stand in this place and I say I have a solution, I'm lying. It's our individual responsibility to start chipping at the mountain, the inequity mountain, and start seeing how can we, in our own little space, how we can make a difference. Because I'll tell you, if you make a difference in one person's life, that one person's life will make another difference to another person's life. Because the talking, the policies might not work. But when you address it from that person to person, that is genuine, that is meaningful, I think we can work out solutions. So this presentation, by now you know, examines dynamics involved in creating an anti-racist pedagogy in the classroom. And also to examine how race, ethnicity, and everything else influence teaching and learning. Of course, the way I teach has been influenced by my background, by my culture, by my race, by my gender, and also by my sexuality. Because having, being a black woman, I'm very conscious of that. And I have to make sure that I take into consideration when I'm talking about issues of class, that I acknowledge the privilege that I have. Because it's not, you can count the number of black professors, black women professors, I think you know what I mean. If you go to 20, you'll be very lucky. So acknowledge that privilege. That it's, we are not many, and I need to acknowledge that. And and at the same time, I need to acknowledge the responsibility that is dawned on me, the responsibility that I carry, the responsibility that when I fail a student, especially a racialized student, the pain that they feel. She is a black woman, but she has failed me. She is a black woman and she doesn't seem to understand. She is a black woman, but she seems to be a sellout. She is a black woman, but she seems to be a traitor. All those culminate on my shoulders because of the way they see me, of the way they feel that maybe I'm not doing enough to create spaces for them, without knowing the barriers, without knowing the policies that have been put in place, without knowing the various ways, the forms that we feel that discriminate against you without knowing that you're being discriminated against. There are so many barriers. So my entry point is who I am, my background, my spirituality. When I come to teaching, I take care of that. I make sure that they are far from. And at the same time, which I have done, I address hidden biases such as racism, classism, homophobia, and all the others. And internalized racism, we do have that as racialized people. We discriminate against each other badly. And I'll tell you, when, for instance, I'm discriminating against Amaral, it's so painful, isn't it? Because it's a black woman versus a black woman, but we constantly do that. That needs to be addressed. And especially within an institution like this, we have to make sure that we don't put each other so that we are constantly in conflict. We are constantly in opposition of each other because many times the universities, places of employment put people who are from the same background, the same culture, the same race together to fight. And we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware of that. So that I make sure that I don't shy away from it, especially this semester where I'm teaching Black feminist thought course. I tell the black women in the class, I tell the racialized women in the class, you have to be aware of how it hurts, how it's so painful when you discriminate against your person who is a racialized person. We cannot afford that. But the colonial structures, the colonial tendencies have made sure that we do that. So we have to be aware of that. Again, I get very emotional when I talk about this. And then to provide the basic prerequisites to understanding the dynamics of 21st century. We are constantly moving in motion with the refugees, with the migration, with immigration, and so on and so forth. People are constantly moving. We are not static anymore. We don't have to wait for a year for a ship to come from Europe or for a ship to come from other parts of the world to be in Toronto. 2 hours. You're from one, no, it's not. 24 hours, I'll be in part of Africa I come from. But 6 hours, 7 hours, I'll be in some parts of Europe. 4 hours, I'll be in some parts of Latin America. So we are constantly in motion, and we have to start thinking of the dynamism that is brought with those movements. We have to be constant I'll repeat again, with those dynamics, because you might see another racialized person or another Caucasian person or somebody from East Asia, Central Asia, and so on and so forth, and just assume that they have been here for a long time when they just arrived. So their challenges, their way of understanding the Canadian landscape will be totally different than somebody who has been born here. So we didn't have to constantly be revising our interaction, our anti-racist pedagogy, because it's constantly shifting and moving. Again, you know, I'll be focusing quite a bit, if I have the time, on how an inclusive education looks like in terms of the way I teach. And in particular, what kind of anti-racist pedagogy I take into consideration. I will conclude with a discussion on the strategies that, again, that we all will be having a discussion to ensure that we can have some strategies as we lead the way. You know, when I started teaching at the University of Toronto in 1998 as a session, one of the things that I developed was a theoretical framework called systems discourse theory. And what at that time, the theory that I had in mind was the intersections or the circles of the students, teachers, faculty, students, teachers, faculty, administration, and all that, and the society. That we are so connected with those, if you draw the circles, we are so connected that when a student comes from home to the school, they bring whatever they have from home in the school, The same thing with the teachers, the same thing with the administration, the same thing with the people working here. So how do we ensure that what we bring, especially for the students in terms of knowledge, is privilege, is taken into consideration? But at the same time, it's not taken to mean that you know everything about that particular group of people. Because many times, when I'm in a room, somebody will look at me and say, "Joking, I'm sure being from Africa," and then they start a conversation. Da, 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 da. I said, "What did you say?" Because why do they assume Africa is a country? Why do they assume I know everything about Africa? So make sure when you're in a class or when you're in a room, don't look and say, "I guess you know everything about Africa." No, don't. Because it's really, and you know, some of the children, some of the students, some of the staff could have been born here, and they may have never stepped out of this continent. So don't put that responsibility, and hence the reason why I thought of this systems discourse. So, and the purpose of it was to examine the interconnections between schools, students, society as subsystems within the systems. It was also to highlight the various dimensions of institutions and illustrate the functioning and the relationship of the subsystems within larger society. And the reason why I say that is because, especially the last one, is because when we sit, especially in administrative offices, the policies we put through, the forms that we are given the responsibility to design, the intake forms, the employment forms, all kinds of forms. What are the implications? How do those forms discriminate? How do those forms segment institutional racism, societal racism? How do they segment without you knowing? And they do. So look at the form again and again before you say this can go. Because many times those forms have so much implication. Those forms can mean life and death of a particular person who is filling those forms. And also the system discourse is illustrates systematic power imbalances as well as methodical barriers that are embedded within the and I'll tell you about these power imbalances. She said I'm a white woman. Because I'll tell you, many times I'm walking with a student who is Caucasian. We enter a building, I'm the professor. And people will look at the Caucasian woman and say, "Hello, Professor Wane." Yeah. It's not once, it's not twice, it's not three, I cannot even count. And the latest time, you see now my English is evaporating. The latest time, the last time that this happened was my student was defending. And the person who was chairing the committee came in and said, read all the names. And said, good, we have quorum. And then he looked at me and said, I did not know assistant professors can supervise students. I'm a full professor. I was the only black woman, racialized woman around the table. I did not know that the assistant professors can supervise. My colleagues turned and said, what did he say? Fortunately, I have very good colleagues. And so one of my colleagues said, why do you assume that she's an assistant professor? The guy said, I was just joking. That's one. Another example, this is to show power imbalances regardless of what institutional powers or what position powers we carry. We get stripped because of the skin color, because of gender, because of all kinds of the differential markers, the social differential markers that we carry. I'll give you one more example. I usually hold a thesis group for all my students once a month. And we were sitting around the table, and this person came and said, oh wow, I've heard so much about Professor Wane's, you know that I'm Professor Wane, Professor Wane's thesis group. I'm so glad it's taking place tonight. Wow, I guess you're Professor Wane. So she turned around to a white woman and said, I guess you're Professor Wane. And the student says, no, that Professor Wane, I'm just a student. She made sure, she actually turned her back to me like this and continued the conversation with the student. Okay? As if I did not exist. And of course, I'll tell you, I don't get hurt anymore. Because it's not, for me, I just feel sorry for the person. And I feel sorry because, not necessarily for the person, because we as institutions of education, we have failed. We have failed to provide an education where we should not assume that the person you meet has particular characteristics, and the person you meet who has particular characteristics and who speaks in a particular way can only be relegated to a particular position. Within the university, you can only be relegated to a student if you're a professor. So just even in faculty meetings, or when you have town halls, or when you meet as a council, it's important to address these things, because for me, because I've been here for so long, it just bounces back. I've created a wall so that it just bounces back. Of course, sometimes I get hurt. Sometimes I cry as I drive home, but I say, it's okay, it's okay. It enables an understanding of institutions and how they create and sustain interconnectedness and interdependency. So we have to be vigilant on how the systems discourse, the various interconnectedness feed on each other in a positive way, and addresses the dilemmas, the tensions, and the fears the occupants of these institutions may experience as they come to grips with their roles in the institution. What are some of the tensions that you go through in your role, and so on and so forth? So the anti-racist discourse is defined as an action-oriented strategy for institutional systemic change to address racism and interlocking systems of social oppression. I'll tell you, and I always say this, do not be scared to talk about issues of race. Do not be scared to talk about racism, because you did not engineer it. the institutions that we occupy have provided a bedrock for it to reproduce itself. So if we don't have a discussion about it, then we'll be part of producing that discourse on a daily basis. So let's make sure that we have a conversation, we talk about it, and don't feel that you're being targeted. Don't feel that you're being singled out. No. Or you don't feel that, oh my God, she's talking about this because she's a racialized person. Do not feel that. We need to have a conversation, and a comfortable conversation, and a meaningful conversation, because we are all implicated, as I said that earlier. It attempts to take seriously the politics of difference and aims to decentralize power. Because when you have that conversation, that the students know that you might come to class and the person that is in front of you is a racialized person, they don't insult that person by saying, how did you get here? Then you spare the time so that we don't have to do performance when we enter the class. Because every time I enter a class, especially that I have not taught before, I have to start with, I have so many degrees, I have published this. If the university does its job, I don't have to do performance. I don't have to do that dance anymore. We can spend that time teaching our students. And then acknowledge the difference in and among marginalized groups, and I talked about that, and the complexity of shifting differences due to historical and experiential differences and institutional oppression of marginalized people. And I always say that it's our responsibility, and let's not make it laminated. It is our responsibility to know that racialized people have a particular history, that they bring. And this is the history that has been packaged and reproduced and produced and so on and so forth. And it's not sometimes easy to be in these spaces. Let's find ways of making it easy. Because when you make the life easy, even for a student, their productivity goes up. They are more engaged. They become better students. But if you're constantly feeling, oh my God, I have to perform, I have to wear this particular jacket, and then when I leave the compound, when I leave the office, I unbutton it and wear my own jacket. Why? Make it a place where you long to go to in the morning. Make it an institution, and we as University of Toronto are famous because of the equity that we have been implementing, the conditions that we provide our employees, the diversity in our universities. Let it be real. Let it be real for the people who are here. Acknowledge that inequities are grounded in everyday material conditions of people's lives, and that there is a need to move beyond the narrow parameters of diversity talk. We have to stop. We have to stop talking about diversity and start acting. We have to be implementers. We have had many visionaries in this university. We didn't have to start implementing. Is it 1 o'clock already? How much time?
10
How much time?
10. It's 10 till 1. I mean, we have till 2. But some people will have to come in, like, because of teaching, some people will come in,
Okay.
after they finish teaching, and some people will have to
Okay.
leave. But we're,
You're good.
we're 40 minutes in.
Oh,
We've got
okay.
2 hours.
All right. Did you want to ask a question before you leave? All right, no problem.
sorry.
Okay, good. And explores and questions the history and the context of unquestioned hegemonic values and beliefs. That is the system, the anti-racist system. Yes.
I'm just digesting.
Okay. Yeah, because I'll tell you, we didn't need to question our history over and over and over again. Because especially the newcomers that come Canada is a great place. You have a very, very good name. We have an excellent name. When the newcomers get here, let them not find out that the residential schools, the last residential school was closed in 1996. Let them not find out from, as a Bible. Let that history be taught. And let it be taught and say that was a particular kind of history that we are really sorry that it happened. It was a colonial project, and I always say, as Dorothy Smith talks about, a circle of men that conceptualized the colonial project and that executed that, and we became players in that colonial project. How do we interrupt that project that has been handed down to us? How do we become players not to perpetuate, but to interrupt, to disrupt that colonial project? Advocates for integrative approaches instead of equity issues being segregated as subjects. I always say that it's good that you embed it. It becomes part and parcel of your everyday, not to have a class. I used to teach a class on anti-racist studies for the teacher education. But at some point I felt that I think it should be part and parcel of the teaching that we do, and not to be segregated, and not to be a one-off, but to be an everyday, to be part of who we are, to be part of our discourse, to be part of what we do here, even in our conversations. To address questions of power and agency, I've talked about that. And demands that students and teachers struggle to make their own social framework of clearer, more accurate, and to be more realistic. In other words, let's start empowering our own students, because if we, as employees of the university, we are embracing a particular kind of language, then the students will actually start getting empowered. They'll start saying, oh wow, it's not difficult to talk about issues of race anymore at the University of Toronto. Can you imagine if that is what everybody knew about us? We'll be invited every corner, for people to hear us talk. And recommends that before using an equity or an racist framework, educators should consider themselves as learners first and start with their own self-awareness. For me, that is very important. I always say that I'm a learner. I always say that I'm a student. And when I go to my class, I'm just a facilitator. I'm just a coach. And I always tell my students that I learn from you. We are co-creating this course. We are co-creating the lessons, the discussions, the conversations that will take place. We are co-creating the outcome of this course, because it's not me only. I'm also learning. I'm also learning what it means to be an anti-racist educator. I'm learning. And interruptions the status quo through the social and personal commitment to political activism of anti-racist educational practices. Because you see, with an anti-racist pedagogy, there is the theory, but there is also the doing. So you cannot just have the theory, you have to do it. Once you get committed, you have to do it. It's not just enough to have a conversation, you have to do it. And it has to be seen in terms of maybe the way you address issues in class, not to have your course outline and it has all good readings, but when a student asks the question, you say, next. In other words, avoiding to enter into a difficult conversation, into an uncomfortable conversation. And I always say that it's during those comfortable spaces, comfortable moments that we learn. And it's okay to say, honestly, I had not thought of this. is there anybody in the class that can initialize this conversation? I'm not, like, I haven't read this. I put it in the syllabus because I wanted us to learn together. I wanted us to have a conversation. So the language that is meaningful to all shareholders when you employ the two frameworks, that is the addresses to discourse and the systems discourse, we create a language. We create a language that is common to all of us. We create a language that when you use that language, people will not say, that's the group that talks about this, and that's the other group that avoids it. We create some unit of purpose, unity of purpose. We sort of have critical and practical approaches to our teaching, our working, our way of doing things. So we are constantly reflecting, we are constantly being practical. We are constantly asking questions. What do you think of this? I'm going to this meeting. What do you think of this? How do you think people in that room will take this? And then scholars who understand the intersections of the systems can go beyond the superficial questions to the tangible process of decarbonising and ascertaining the understanding of values of beliefs. So this is what will happen once we have a common language, once we have the critical approaches, then we go beyond the superficiality of the conversation. The superficiality of making everybody feel good and comfortable. You remember I said I'll mention about multicultural education. Because of time, I'll leave that for another day, if you invite me. I want to talk about the resistance to change. And I'll sit down because I want us to have a conversation. I think I have laid a good background to this conversation. What are some of the challenges when it comes to change? I'll open it up for conversation. What are some of the challenges? Why do we as humans resist the change? Fear, okay. Laziness.
What'd you say?
Laziness.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
Laziness. Okay. Anything else?
Not knowing where to begin and what will make the difference.
That's
Yeah.
yeah. You can imagine with fear and not knowing, you're scared. Where do I begin? It's a new discourse. It's new knowledge. Where the hell do I begin? Anything else?
Institutional constraints and demands.
Yes. Institutions demand can make you, and especially the constraints that are imposed on us. You are supposed to teach this. You are actually getting out of you're getting out of line. This course is not supposed to be taught anymore. Why are you offering it? When that happens, delete the course from the books. Delete the way you do things. But add it on into other things. So you have to have ways of resisting, ways of embracing change. You have to find the strategies for resistance. Which are those strategies? Let's talk about strategies of resistance.
Strategies to implement change or to resist people who are resisting it?
Okay, the strategies, what I mean by strategies of resistance, you don't have to have a strategy to resist change. You can have a strategy of resistance to bring change. Yeah. Yes?
Well, the university loves data and research, so proof about why change is actually beneficial is one strategy we have.
That's a good strategy.
Creating an alternative knowledge base.
Yes. Creating an alternative knowledge base, yes.
Maybe building on both of those, working with students, getting their first-hand statements about where they see the need for change.
Yeah.
And documenting that,
Very
sharing
good.
that, including them.
I think it would also be helpful if organizations actually rewarded innovation and creativity as opposed to rewarding the status quo.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Building community and strength among those of us who want to see change happen.
Yes, that's a good one. And also allyship. You know, creating allyship. It's very important because you cannot as a woman bring change. But if you are a community that come together regardless of your race, ethnicity, and form those groups, actually change can take place. Any other? I thought Mark was putting up his hand. So I indicated that inclusive pedagogy means, you know, developing policies and programs that are actually supported and implemented by the university. Like if I can go back to what Amara talked about, the research that I did, I think I did that research looking at the experiences of women. That was students, faculty, and staff. It was not an easy research to do. The stories I got from that research were amazing. And I'm hoping that, and I've seen some shift. I've seen some shift in terms of policies and programs. I've seen shift because if I can talk about black faculty, I've seen now we do have a black caucus. We have an association of black faculty of U of T, and we have been meeting and presenting our issues to Simcoe. I've seen, for instance, the implementation of money given out for, I don't know whether this is a result of my report, so forgive me for saying this. But at least, I don't know whether it was a coincidence, but some monies were put out by the provost where indigenous and black faculty could be employed. And currently we are we'll be interviewing black faculty for a black studies position in my department. Ooh, can you imagine that? So it's one thing to do research. It's another thing to ask yourself, how do we translate that research into practice? Who are the right people? Which offices do we need to knock the door and say, this work has been done, we have the data, we have the voices, we have the narratives. How can we change the narratives 10 years from now? How do we start implementing the policies, this one and so forth? How do we create safe space? How do we create, because I think that's a big challenge. Because many times when we don't have safe spaces, we perform. When we are not sure that I have allies in the room, I perform. If I did not know I have allies in this room, I would have been telling you a different story. But I feel I'm in a safe space. I feel I am among a group of community members that speak the same language as I do. I feel comfortable being here. So the question is, how do we multiply? How do we multiply the safe spaces? How do we ensure that we don't have to censor what we have to say when we are in meetings? Because many times we censor what we are going to say so that we are not victimized. And it happens. you say this, and you know that you'll be victimized. How do we create that? So I'm asking you, how do we create safe spaces within our institution, within our place of work, within our offices, within our classes? I'm asking you. Yes.
How important do you think it is that when students walk into our classrooms or walk into, say, a writing center, that they have some kind of sense that their culture, ethnicity, group is recognized there? In other words, some kind of sense of either people working there or the art displayed or whatever, something in a course. It could be the choice, like if you have the ability to use writers of different ethnicities or races, even looking at the course outline. So how important is it to a student's safety, feeling a safe space, to have that kind of visual sense that they are indeed recognized?
You're asking?
I'm asking, do you think that's an important part of safe space?
I think it is as a beginning, because we can have posters of different racialized people, different groups of people, and we can have maybe one or two racialized persons. Or we can have one or two readings in our class, but we do not engage. We do not engage with what is surrounding us. We don't, like for instance, we know that for the longest people have had this conversation that posters that represent black heroes and heroes find their spaces in our walls during the Black History Month. How do we ensure that there is permanency? And it's not just permanency of one particular group of people, but permanency of all people represented. How do we ensure that? And these are very, very difficult conversations. The notion of feeling you're just a token. How do we ensure that it's not just you're in the room because you are a token? How do you ensure that people don't ask, people don't come and say, I guess you got employed because we are trying to fill a quota? How do we ensure those conversations? So it's a more deep conversation that needs to be a conversation that needs to be held by all stakeholders. These are good images. These are good images. Unlike Silicon Hall right here. Ooh, let's go there. Yeah, Silicon Hall is another one. And it's on record. They know it. It's not a secret. Just go to the walls. Who do we see? Maybe we could intersperse those images with maybe indigenous paintings, indigenous heroes, or racialized, and so on and so forth. A conversation. Something to think about.
So to this point around the safe spaces and how do we go about creating them, I think it has to be very, very intentional.
Yes, very good, excellent.
Yeah, and it has to actually, I think, start from the top,
Yes.
so that departmental leaders actually give voice to what safe spaces mean, and allow those who are working in departments to be able to create that, and to involve those who enter those spaces to co-create what a safe space looks like.
So it has to be intentional. Just like the way that the money that the provost gave for indigenous and black hirings was intentional. That recruitment was intentional, and they actually see Like 2 years ago, the money was given within 6 months, the money was used, 1.5 million. Another batch of money has been given, and we are seeing more and more racialized, we are seeing more and more indigenous people coming to our university. So intentional, the intention is very important. Yes.
I was thinking of the question in more of saying kind of office hours or something where I have a chance to work one-on-one with the student. I was thinking of the safe space in that context. And it just seems to me, and putting it out there, it's like, if I just go in assumptionless, and I just think this is a new human being that I don't know, and just try to just start there. But are you saying there needs to be more acknowledgement of, you know, it's like, because I have black women, I have black men, which are actually somewhat more, you know, a lower, I mean, a bigger minority than women, but I have them come into my office hours. And I just start from the framework of how are they, you know, today, and, you know, just to build a relationship right there, just between two people. But is there a different context that you would say to start it, to make sure it's starting off on the right foot? You know, I mean, you know, I would hate to say I'm acknowledging you're a person of a different ethnicity than me. I would rather not have that space. I would just rather be saying, let's talk about what we want to talk about, which is usually, you know, it's usually content-based in terms of office hours. But where's the landmines there? What, you know?
I think what you're asking is honestly very, very important. You cannot when somebody enters the room and say, oh, you know, no, just be genuine. Just because we are spirit being, we are spiritual people, we are spiritual being, and when you're genuine, the other person feels it. You know that being genuine is the most important. You know, welcome to my office. What can I do for you? Because and that is especially if you're in a space of you know, in an office that brings change. Having the frontline workers being welcoming, and not when you come in and they are, you know, genuinely welcoming the person and genuinely feeling that I'm here for you, I see you, is very important. So you don't have to do anything outside what you usually do. You just have to be yourself. I think that's very important. Yeah. And then, yeah.
I was thinking, I went to a conference recently, and the keynote speaker, this is a writing center conference, and the keynote speaker was a Black writing center director, and she foregrounded this. And she said she's probably the only, and it was all about, one of the things that she said in terms of is be active allies, right? Speaking to the primarily white audience. Don't, and I'm thinking about that safe space, do not allow anyone else to be alone if they are making a point or standing up for something, right? I mean, the importance of creating a space and even a responsibility on everybody to stand up for it. And I'm thinking about it also in the context of all that we're hearing now about sexual harassment. And everybody knew about it, right? But nobody said anything, right? That this is so how, I mean, it's an interesting, given institutional power dynamics, right? What allows people to feel they can speak up or support someone else. But it's not just one, it's not just a racialized faculty member's responsibility, it's everybody's. And that's, you know, what is the role of the ally?
What is the role of the ally? It's very important. Because once you take that responsibility as an ally, it actually becomes an easy job to do. And you can actually start seeing lots and lots of changes in your institutions.
I was just wondering, sort of thinking out loud around the role of, like, expression and trust relations. So within safe space, how I first heard of this term, I don't actually know where it comes from, but it was like 10 years ago within AIDS organizing, so I'm really active within HIV communities of people. So the safe space that was used first in Montreal, and here the context I circulate in is relating to holding like sort of support group, or the idea of the AIDS service organization is a safe space that holds people sharing is okay, it's sort of something idealistic, but the idea that there's a philosophy that when you cross a threshold, you're entering, there's sort of like a collective, there's a collective sense built on solidarity around, in this case, a sort of social identity, but sexual identity too, and that you hold, responsibility, for listening to stories and then communicating respectfully. So that's sort of part of the talk that when you begin to freeway service organizations and this sort of notion of safe space and what it means, like that's how I understand it. Can we do this? Is that part of what you mean too, or is that part of what we could? Is it like about trusting and being trusted by students and sort of? It is quite different than mental health services and therapy and referrals. It's sort of because when you talk about authenticity and being genuine, I'm wondering if this is also part of your.
That's a very good point. When you talk about safe space, what exactly do you mean? I always start from the point that relationships are sacred. And when I enter a relationship, whether it's with the students or whether it's in my place of work with colleagues, if I want to create the sacredness of that, I have to remember that relationships are sacred. And when I betray, when I take whatever is being shared in a manner that damages the name of the person, or if I can go back to notions of colonialism in a manner that where I become part of the reproductive elements of discrimination and the tarnishing of other people's names, then I'm breaking some sacred beliefs and sacred ties. So so it becomes a very reflective way of living. It's not easy, because I have been to spaces, or I have been in a class where a student or a faculty was saying, of course I'm not going to share this, but I know that you're not going to repeat it. They're not telling me not to share it. I'm sharing this, but of course I trust you that you're not going to repeat it, and if you repeat it, you're not going to misrepresent what I say. So again, they're adding to you a responsibility so that whatever you say, it will not be misrepresented, it will not be misquoted, and it will not create spirit injury. And Patricia Williams talks about that, spirit injury, to ensure that that doesn't happen. So it's a more complicated, responsibility that when you decide to use an activist pedagogy, it's a huge responsibility, because you have to constantly question yourself. You have to constantly reflect on what you're doing. Many times after my class, I actually think through the students in my class. And many times in my class, when I see a student who has been vocal and talking is quiet. Do you mind? I actually say, do you mind? And I say, is everything okay? I do that just to show, and I always say, is it okay? Can I put my hand around you? Are things okay? You didn't say anything today. Can I help? Can we talk after class? And so I sort of create that sacredness with my students. And many times the students will come and say, I'm shocked. You actually asked me. Or I had a very interesting situation 2 weeks ago where I went to the student and I didn't tag the student, I put my hand on the chair and said, is everything okay? I haven't seen you for 2 classes. In 2 of my classes. He said, no, I was here last week. I said, no. Like I'm not fighting with you, I'm just concerned. I did not see you for 2 weeks. Is everything okay? And the student said, can we talk outside? So I followed her, and she said, I've just come from BC. I know nobody here. This is a young Caucasian student. I'm new here, and it's very lonely. And I find that everybody has been to school with everybody else, and I'm an outsider. So I made a point when I came back to class to say, let's change our sitting positions from now, and I'll take 1 minute, go around and sit next to somebody that you do not know, and ask them their name, ask them how they feel. Look at them and tell them I see you and I care. And out of that, the student came back 2 days later to say that, thank you for what you did, because at least now I have somebody I can talk to. So there are different strategies that you use to create that, the sacredness of a relationship. And being a reflective teacher that did feel what the students are. Yeah. Another way I create that sacredness is when a student submits an assignment. It's very good. The second assignment is, so I usually say, your assignment, you're usually a very, very good writer. What happened? What happened this time? Do I ask to talk about it? And then we come and share testimonies. And then, last but not least, and then I'm quiet, we can conclude. I usually have food in my class. Yes. So we have created a list where every class, students bring food in class. And I feel that food is a way of connecting people, because when we take our break, instead of running to Tim Hortons or running to Starbucks, we actually segregate around the food and we have conversations. And those conversations become very meaningful, and I've seen relationships that end up in marriages, that end up in all kinds of things happen because of just...
I'm going to her class.
Harmony class.
Just talking about food and sharing drinks around, coffee and food. It's amazing. And I have to think of how do we, because I know food. I grew up in a place where there will be a fire, a wooden fire, and we'll be sharing stories. How do I create that space in an institution like U of T? People bring food, and we have conversations. So you find, when I go to an evening class, I leave at 9 sometimes, because people are still having conversations. Thank you so much for inviting me here. It was a pleasure, and I truly, truly appreciate the space to share my scholarship.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You can
All right, that's true.
Yes, I will.
Yes, we did bring food.
Yeah. I have indicated that I'll eat after the presentation.
So I encourage people to stay if you are leaving. If you have really appreciate your feedback on this session.
I'd like to add something to what you said. I love it when I hear people talking about loving students and caring about students and having this ethic of care. And I feel like one of the things that we run up against is not having that set of values sort of, infused in the university bureaucracy. And I know a lot of my colleagues in this room share, this same kind of love of students and the kind of approach that you describe about almost, a sacred relationship with them. But at the same time, there are colleagues in administration that are surrounding us as we're in a research university that are really diminishing that and talking about students as though they are just a number or a tuition, to get. And ideas about, you need to limit your time with students, you need to keep your door shut, you need to not ask about students' lives because then they're going to come and, I keep hearing people say, well, they're just going to come and suck all the energy out of you if you're nice to them. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to be nice to my students. And so, I'm always heartened when I find other kindred spirits who want to create that kind of relationship building. But I've been more stymied about how do we create that so that it becomes more top down, so it becomes like this is what our campus or this is how our university approaches teaching. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, if I can tack something onto that, I don't think it's an accident that we're almost all women here talking about an ethics of care. I think a lot of this, is care work, which is not rewarded in the same way as institutional work.
Right.
I don't know, I think one solution is force all of them to chairs, right?
Right, yes.
And get implemented ethics of care from there, but we're thinking with the fact that this is in some ways it's gender labor, and it's sort of disheartening to see. It's really nice to see all the same faces, but to see a certain group of faces missing here today as well is
Yeah. So one of the things that we could do is start maybe having conversations around, and the students will be our focal point, and see how do we ensure that the students don't become like the secondary.
Yeah.
They're so important.
Yeah.
For me, students are so important. We can start that conversation and see how we can go, how far we can go with it.
Actually, I come from the perspective of being in the tenure stream in faculty member, who cares an awful lot about teaching. A couple of things for me, it's just a personal thing, is that I'm very conscious about my personal choice, right? And that, being an effective teacher and having, mentor type of relationship with students is important to me, and I'm gonna live with the consequences of it in some measure, and not, like I said, live with the consequences of, really having that sense of comfort about myself, choosing a particular path, and then realizing that a lot of other times, when people would come up with these things, it's more they're afraid that you will demand of them what you demand of yourself, right? So they're coming at it from sort of a scary position. So there's just no way you're going to get those, a person who really doesn't want it, who's horrified with the idea of deeply interacting with students. I just don't think, I think you have to show that, to me at least, you have to show that this is a very rewarding place to be, and that you have a productive career and doing this. And maybe sometimes when you recognize when someone's coming at it from a scary position, and you help them a little bit. Say, this doesn't have to suck all your energy out. I know how to make boundaries, because you do, right? I have to admit, if someone says I'm 24/7 for my students, I'm a little worried about them for their own health, type of thing, right? But it's possible to be caring, but not to be, to have your own life and have your own boundaries. So that, at least that's as far as I know how to take it.
I think Connie.
I just wanted to add to this. I think when we are taught to be teachers, or what's happening now in terms of teaching people to be teachers, we're teaching them to perform, what it means to perform being a professor.
Yeah.
And they assume a persona, some 50, 100-year-old notion of what it means to be a professor in North America, or in the Western world. We can use the rhetoric of saying we're not the authorities, that they can access information, but still to perform authority. And some of you noticed that I have been rethinking teaching, in particular in the last year or two, because my son's experience in first year, and thinking about his experience has made me a better teacher. But really what it comes down to is something very simple I've decided is, if I were to advise people about how to be a teacher, it's not what kind of scholar you are. It's not how much information you're going to give students. It's what kind of person do you want to be in that classroom to the students. And I don't know, I remind myself that every week. Well, I wasn't the best person to say today. No, but it's just what kind of person do I want to be in that classroom to share what I know and to move them along their journey of becoming who they're going to be. Anyways.
Yeah, and to be a person. I mean, to be willing to be a person, right? Instead of a structure. It is really a big thing.
Sorry, Laura.
Wonder if we can unpack a little bit the role of power and privilege and its resistance to anti-racist pedagogies. In the 29 minutes that we have, keep it brief.
The role of power and privilege. I think that's it's a topic that people are scared of. It's a topic where there is an assumption that if we embrace an anti-racist pedagogy, we are going to be collapsing boundaries, we are going to be sharing power. And in a nutshell, what I always say is that for each one of us, regardless of our station in life, regardless of our positionality or our social location, is to have a conversation within ourselves. What power do I have? What privileges do I have as I go to my class? And this should not just be as a racialized woman, as a racialized male. It's for everybody. As a white male, ask yourself, what do I embody as I go into that class? What kind of power do I command? Unspoken power, institutional power, historical power. What does my body embody as I go in? What kind of, because I always say that our body are our text. I'm telling you, our bodies are our text. So when a white male stands in front of a room, there are particular texts that are written on him that, unless he unpacks it, his teaching will be consumed from that standpoint. But if he starts by unpacking, if he starts by saying, I do know, especially during the introductory remarks in the class, we are here to learn. Because of my training, I will have much more maybe than all of you, but I'm willing to learn from each one of you. I'm willing to look at the history of what I'm going to teach, from the abstract, Eurocentric way that it has been passed down, to multiple ways of knowing, the alternative ways of knowing that has been masked and left outside. I'm willing to have that conversation. I do know and especially if you're tall and particular, again you command a particular stature, there is a particular power that goes with that. So you need to unpack that. The same thing with a patient, woman, female who goes into a class. Unpack that, because there are particular powers that they embody. Unpack that. Talk about it. Make it comfortable for the students. Because when you don't unpack it, you don't make it comfortable for the students. The students, and we have had examples, and I've written about it. I've written about it because, again, there are particular kinds of text you carry in, on your body that are embedded in you. And you need to present, to put that on table, to demystify the historical knowledges that have been carried. Because you as, for instance, as a Caucasian woman, you could be from a working class background. You could be the only Caucasian female that has ever gone to a university from your family. You could be from a very underprivileged community, but people do not know. Unpack it, demystify the power that has been imposed on you historically. And when you do that, then it's interesting because I've had professors in my department who have done it, and students flock to them and say, you can't believe it. This white woman was talking about this, was talking about her privilege, was talking. So you sort of demystify. So you demystify the power that has been bestowed on us. You demystify it. I demystify by saying that, especially when it comes to issues of representation, I demystify by saying that even if as colonized as possible, even if I'm steeped in Eurocentric ways of knowing, the fact that I'm in front of this class, that in itself, or going to the history books, you're the black professor teaching it. Even if I'm telling you I'm teaching Eurocentric ways of knowing, and I've become part of reproductive system. I've become part of that knowledge production, I'm perpetuating it. Because there are different texts that we carry, that we. And as Connie says, the responsibility, what responsibility? Because we have to think of the young people, the faces that I showed. How do we start having those conversations even around our kitchen tables? How do we start having those conversations so that they don't become conversations just when you get into the classroom? It's not easy, but I think as a member of the teaching academy, I think we can start those conversations. We can, unpacking the power and the privilege. Yeah, it's not easy, but we can chip at it slowly. There is a proverb that I usually say or end my talks, that no matter how long the night, dawn will come. No matter how long the night, there'll be daybreak. No matter how long. It might take, I hope not centuries, I hope not another 100 years, I hope not 2, 3, 4, 5 decades. But I think we are at a point in our history where we can start addressing what we embody and having those comfortable conversations. That was...
Sorry to be a downer.
Yes.
We've been talking a lot about how to create safe spaces, and one thing that you said that I kind of connected with earlier was about how discomfort is one of the best places for learning to occur, and I try and employ that in teaching classes, but I've more recently become very aware of it in myself when you're talking about safe places, and the fact that as a person who is a white woman, a position of power, when I have so many questions about racialized experiences, and I feel anxious to ask those questions for fear that they may come across in the wrong way. There's such a huge and nasty conversation going on south of the border about what political correctness looks like, what free speech looks like, what hate speech looks like. And trying to phrase my questions in such a way that represent my curiosity and my desire to learn without looking as though I'm disrespecting an experience. And so I've increasingly found myself in uncomfortable and unsafe spaces for myself, which I think is a great learning opportunity to try and get a better understanding about what some students are experiencing, but not really sure how to move past that and to have the courage to try and find a way to open up those conversations in a respectful way.
So it's a very honest statement for you to state, because it's when you find, like you want to learn, You want to know. And you don't want people to misunderstand you. You don't want people to feel that you're putting them down. You want, and at the same time, you don't want people to think, oh my God, this person doesn't know anything about it. So how do you, I always say, frame it in form of a question, and always say, you know something, honestly, if whatever I'm going to ask, please do not kill me, do not crucify me, do not, because I genuinely want to participate, want to be a better person, a better colleague, a better ally, and so on and so forth. And correct me, help me to unpack this, to unpack how, and then, you know, help me to unpack this, because this is a great moment for me to learn about you, about your experiences, about what it means. Because I always say this, when we talk about information and knowledge, it's different. Because information is like the facts I've just given you. Those are just facts. That's knowledge. But knowledge is informed by experience. For instance, I can say, I know the taste of coffee because it's actually good coffee. But if I've never tasted coffee, I can describe the taste of coffee, but I have no knowledge of it. So you will be saying, honestly, I have no knowledge of how you experience particular aspects of life, but I can try to gather information so that I can be a critical ally, so that I can be a critical person. You know, you start creating allyship. You start creating what I call a mutual circle. With a mutual circle is where when people start having conversations that make sense, you step inside a particular circle, and then within that circle, you can trust each other to learn and to unlearn. Because it's a question of learning and unlearning. Yeah, I don't know whether that makes sense.
No, does it?
Yes.
Oh gosh. My train of thought, one thing I'm thinking about, maybe because this is course evaluation season, where we practice in an ethics of care lens and bring our good skills of empathy and competencies related to wisdom and practice benefit doubt and practice openly and lovingly with students, right? If we can assume that we do this, what has disturbed me since joining the UT since 2013 is the sort of perpetuation of a certain social violence through the course evaluation, where, divorced from how we actually practice, how we're taken up textually,